Hi, I'm Steve Kep. I'm co-founder of From Day One, our forum on corporate values, and we're looking forward to hosting today's webinar. But before I do, I'd like to share something special we have for today's attendees. Our next monthly virtual conference is coming up Wednesday, June 16th, that's next week, and it's titled The New Benefits That Employees Need and Want Today. Thanks to our partners and today's sponsor, we have some complimentary VIP tickets available for those who've joined today's webinar. That's you. I'm putting a link in the chat space right now. You'll want to take advantage of this one. The regular price for our conference tickets is $149. And this link will give you a free VIP ticket for the whole day's activities. So look in the chat space for that. Today, we'll be exploring the topic, Mind the Gap, understanding and closing the future skills gap to build the workforce of the future. No one can predict the future of work, but we can put in place talent frameworks that enable us to respond to change nimbly and confidently. During this session, Aon will share their latest research on the trending skills your workforce needs to drive the success and future readiness of your organization. They will also share with you the future critical skills needed to optimize your talent strategies and how to measure them in your workforce and identify any gaps, how to benchmark skills against peer organizations, how to drive the reskilling and upskilling journey through a lasting skills taxonomy, and how to align your reward strategy to value future relevant skills. Our sponsor today is Aon. I'll tell you a bit about them. Aon is a leading global professional services firm providing a broad range of risk, retirement, and health solutions. Their 50,000 colleagues in 120 countries empower results for clients by using proprietary data and analytics to deliver insights that reduce volatility and improve performance. Now, a few quick logistical items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions to our speakers at any time during the program using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Our speakers will answer the questions toward the end of the hour. Also, our speakers will be giving you a sneak preview of a new report from Aon, and you'll be getting a link to this presentation and the report in an email after the program. Now, this webinar is being recorded and it will be available on demand soon after the event. So you can look out for that email in about 24 hours with the link to the video. That email will also have info on how you can get professional development credits for this session from the Society of Human Resource Management. And look out for a written account of this conversation on our website at fromday1.co. Now, I'd like to pass the mic to Marinas from Aon. Okay, Marinas, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steve. A huge thank you from us here at Aon to the entire From Day One team. Steve, you and Chris and your team have just been absolutely amazing in helping us host this session, and we're really looking forward to having a great discussion about how to close the future skills gap, as you shared. And we just to kind of reiterate the point, we'd love to have everybody's feedback and questions as we go, because we want to keep this as informative and as interactive as possible. And we'll monitor these in the chat function as you share those comments, and then respond to those in due course as well. If for any reason we don't get to your questions, we'll be happy to share those afterwards, share responses afterwards. And yeah, so with that little bit of logistics out of the way, let me introduce our team here. So we are joined by my amazing colleagues, Kathy MacKay and Stefan Gartner, and also in the background, our amazing marketing lead, Stephanie Kranz, will be fielding questions and also kind of helping us direct logistics. So Kathy and Stefan, maybe we can start with a couple of introductions and get us kicked off. Kathy, I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Marinas. Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy MacKay, and my background is in industrial organizational psychology. I have over 20 years of experience in the talent space, and my role with Aon is really to partner with clients on their talent assessment strategies as it relates really to all aspects of an employee's life cycle. So everything from selection and hiring all the way over to development and promotion and everything in between. I work with organizations across a wide variety of industries from around the globe, and I also head up our tech and telecom vertical for our North American practice. So I am happy to bring that perspective to the conversation today as well. Stefan?
My name is Stefan Gärtner. Hello, everybody. I'm a partner with Aon and global lead for people analytics out of Los Angeles, California. I've been in this space now for about 20 years, started my journey with a PhD in human resource management and became what you might want to call a workforce analyst, workforce scientist. Over the years, I have learned a lot about modeling data, using data to tell stories with it and have organizations design and improve their workforce strategies. Half of my career I spent in corporate, most of that in Engine, biotech, and the other half of my career I spent in consulting. Back to you, Marinus.
Thank you both. Well, let's start diving into the topic area here today. And we can get started by just thinking about the importance of future skills. And I think we can all agree that over the last couple of years, there have been many factors, not least of which is the pandemic, that have accelerated how quickly things are changing within the workforce from a point of view of technological advances, and also how folks should be adopting and getting ahead of some of those advances. And what we've seen in a broad array of research, as what you can see on the screen there, is that there are loads of different indicators around like what kind of reskilling is required and to what extent it's required. So research from the World Economic Forum has shown that about 50% of all employees globally will need to have some form of reskilling by 2025. And from our perspective, this is really a trend that touches every corner of the economy, and it's only likely to gain more speed as we go. And then in addition to that, our research with about 1,500 HR leaders that we've been conducting now over the course of the last year as the pandemic has unfolded has shown to us that most organizations really are only now at the beginning of their journey to reskill their employees. About 59% of the respondents from our most recent survey has shown that their organizations haven't really defined what skills they need for the future, particularly for things like digital transformation. However, sort of juxtaposed against that point of view, about 3/4 of these leaders have told us that they have some kind of a program in flight to identify current or future skills gaps, and that they're trying to figure out what those strategies are. So this to me shows that things clearly are in motion in terms of figuring out where skills gaps are, but that there's also a related need to kind of point things in the right direction. So organizations really need to define what their future skills are and what skills are critical for them, and then also identify how to upskill and reskill their employees to bridge the gaps that are identified. So against that backdrop, Kathy, maybe we'll start off with you here. I know that skills can mean different things to different people. For instance, some folks focus on technical skills and other folks focus on soft skills. But for our purpose of the discussion here today, can you maybe just give a lens on what we mean by skills, and specifically future skills?
Sure, thanks, Brandon. So to put it simply, skills are things that you can do or abilities that you have learned in order to do a job well. So think about it in terms of that. And then to your point, oftentimes skills are broken down into what we call soft skills or hard skills. And soft skills are those which are more universal. They're not really associated with a particular job, like written communication or active listening or influencing other people can all be considered softer skills. And then on the other hand, the other type of skill is often referred to as a hard skill, or one that refers to more technical abilities and our abilities to really learn them through a formal education process, or maybe a continued learning process, like operating a particular type of machinery, or even writing particular kinds of computer codes can be examples of those. So when we think about skills, I should also mention that competencies are a person's knowledge, skills, and behaviors that lead them to be successful in a job. So think of these as how a person performs on the job. So competencies would be things like leading a team and facilitating meetings, things along those lines. So regardless of what type of skills or even competencies that we're talking about, we hear about them so much in business today because they're very, very critical in understanding what it takes to be successful in a given role. And so it's been interesting here on this slide here we put together for you, just to see the evolution of how skills and competencies have been leveraged over the years, really. So if we think back 10 years ago or so, we had skill libraries and competency models that we built out for a given role. And we measured some of those things when we were hiring and promoting employees, which was great. Today, we still use skills and competencies for hiring and promoting, but we've also added in much more transparency so that individuals interested in applying can really see what's needed for that role. And then if we look even further out, more of that future lens that you were talking about, I'm not gonna lie, COVID certainly catapulted many organizations in this direction much faster than anyone was ever expecting. But going forward, it really is critical to think about skills and competencies in more of a holistic way. So one that reinforces the need not only for skills like reading and writing and competency models that include things like making decisions, but also more of that future-proof strategy. So that structure really allows for rapid change and the evolution of skills and behaviors that are tied to continuous adaptation and technological advances in how we are working and living. So a good example of this is during the pandemic, we saw online stores orders were through the roof. Restaurants that weren't normally takeout just definitely shifted to family meals where you could go and pick things up, and several even offered those little to-go adult beverages in little Capri Sun containers. I know that we experienced a few of those in our house. But the point is that there was a major shift in how society functioned, and a great deal of adaptation took place to fill those needs. And that is the direction that we're heading as we think about future skills and that evolution.
Oh, that's awesome, Kathy. No, thank you so much for that great overview. So obviously there's kind of this link between business strategy and then the types of skills that people need to have as well. So with that in mind, Stefan, what is the number one issue that you're hearing from the clients that you work with around future skills and transformation?
Okay, I would think of two big areas. The first one is pretty foundational when it comes to skills. The concept has been around for many, many years. But what I have noticed over the years is that often working with skills requires processes that are more practical. And Kathy alluded to that when she talked about the future. If you really want to manage skills, improve skills, base planning around skills, not only do you have to measure it in a consistent way, not only do you have to start being able to compare yourself with others so that you understand how you're doing and where you find the skills that you need, also you have to start developing and employing technologies that help you to continuously measure skills and manage them. With that, I mean, measure how you're doing, measure where your gaps are, and then actually measure the progress that you're making towards these gaps. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's number one. It's basically saying we have to become more practical as we start managing skills and actually show progress. The second one is more around what we're seeing out there in the world right now. What is the biggest skill gap? And Kathy talked about this a little bit, which is everything is turning digital. And that trend already existed before Corona, but now it has been vastly accelerated. Just think about it. Any industry that is out there is thinking about ways to virtualize their offerings, be it services or products, the sales process, the manufacturing process even. It's all about thinking, how can we turn this into a virtual environment, or how can we deliver this within a virtual environment. And that in turn means every organization is looking for the really hot skills in the market right now, the digital, the technology skills, which happen to be delivered for the most part by the clients that we have. the big technology organizations all over the country. So that's really the biggest trend that we are seeing in the marketplace, which is everybody is going after the same set of digital skills out there because they have to transform their business. Back to you, Marinus.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Stefan. Well, Kathy, I'm sure you have some complimentary thoughts on this one too, so maybe I'll pose a question to you as well.
Yeah, sure. And I definitely agree with Stefan. What he said, I'm hearing and seeing a lot about organizations undergoing transformations, and the digital skills are definitely in high demand. And by digital skills, I mean those skills that are really tied to the willingness and ability to learn and to seek new development opportunities and to flexibly adapt to changing environments and an openness to try new things. And so from a retail perspective, this is always a good one. We see many organizations who typically relied on a brick and mortar model are now really transitioning more to that e-commerce model, especially with COVID. Consumer habits really shifted rapidly to online consumption, and business had to respond very quickly with digital transformation plans in months rather than years. And so most major retail organizations, to Stefan's point, really recognized the need to reskill their employees before the pandemic, but COVID definitely expedited everything to where we're now making these shifts as part of our economic recovery. And a good example of this is really that we do partner with a global home furnishing brand that brings affordable and very nice looking products and offerings to people all over the world. And they wanted to shift their model and really empower their store managers by shifting them to be more of a regional market manager so that they could serve those digital customers in their surrounding geographical areas while still providing and promoting that great customer experience that they're really known for. So we provided them with a more feature-focused competency model to fit that shift, as well as a one-day assessment process, really consisting of online assessments and interviews and a simulation to target that future role. And we had over 350 or so some store managers go through the process. And as a result, each of those participants really had a greater understanding of how the role was evolving, their own strengths, their own areas of development, and how they themselves fit into that new model. So meanwhile, the organization itself was really excited to elevate the role for these existing employees versus having to, let's face it, go back to the drawing board and screen and hire and onboard hundreds of new employees as part of their transformation. There's a similar story that comes to mind for an American multinational corporation that's known for designing and manufacturing innovative sports-focused footwear and apparel. I'm going to keep their name confidential, but hopefully that's enough to go on. And they're opening about 30 or so different locations each quarter, but these stores will be very digitally focused. And yes, still allow customers to still shop in person, but also online to the point where you can go and pick up your merchandise at a locker, or you can have it even delivered to your house. So this big shift in strategy really impacts how the stores function, the number of employees and the different types of roles that are there, as well as the managers who are now needing some very different skills to lead not only in that brick and mortar fashion, but also with that digital framework, even more so at the forefront.
Kathy, that was amazing. Thank you. That's a lot of really, really good tactical ways to kind of go about sort of addressing this need for future skills. So Stefan, maybe I can pose a question to you here around where organizations should start their journey to get these skills. So from your perspective, what is that first step? How do organizations begin to take the road towards addressing their future skills gaps?
Well, that road can be daunting, but the best way to start is to start small. And with that, I mean, you basically pick either a business unit or 2 or 3 skills that you just know that you need to plan for or to plan in. So that's really the key, the first recommendation here. Don't take it all on at once, start small. and start somewhere where you can basically identify a clear business need, either a gap or an area where you have a hard time retaining people. Secondly, don't start in isolation. So I don't know how many of you are working in HR, but over 20 years of working in the space of workforce planning, I can tell you that the biggest problem that you will encounter in showing success is when you in HR start to plan in isolation. And that's basically what we're showing here in this chart. The starting point for anything that you do when it comes to skill or workforce planning is starting with a business strategy. And that means you need to understand what is your revenue projection, where's the business going, what is different in the future from today, and how will that affect your workforce. So ultimately, it means that you have to translate business strategy into skill needs, compare these to skill availability, identify gaps, and then address them. So that's the second recommendation. Make sure that everything you do is starting from the business strategy, and it's not perceived as an inside-out HR initiative. And the third place to start is really to wrap your head around the key ingredients that you need to be successful when it comes to skill or workforce planning. You basically need to identify the right processes that are not sustainable. In my mind, addressing skill gaps is not a one-point-in-time project. It's an ongoing process that you have to kickstart. That's really what you need to do today to make this successful. But on top of the processes, you need data. You need to process your own data. You need to process external data, and you need to leverage the data to show progress and business impact. Only if you do that will you be able to keep that process alive. And finally, in this day and age, yes, you also need technology. And technology is really what differentiates today from the past. Today, technology will allow you to network all of your decision makers around one workforce model, around one skill model. Today's technology allows you to connect your data directly to your source system and basically show progress that way. That's really where I believe our clients should start today, where you should start today.
That's great. Well, so as you're both discussing future skills and where organizations should start, it's clear to me that this is a really, really big topic area, and there could potentially be other parties that should be involved in this process as well. And I'd love to get your input on that point. So Kathy, although our focus really is here on organizations helping organizations upskill and reskill their workforces to meet future skills gap, who else should be involved in this venture of building future skills more broadly?
Yes, and the answer to that is everyone. So everyone can really take responsibility for their own success and growth, but there is also quite a number of other resources that are available to help, and that's really important to know. We have one example here where Aon's assessment team and Vodafone partnered a few years ago to really develop a platform as a global solution to offer guidance to young people in finding those digital jobs that they were well suited for, and to provide really better access to learning and employment opportunities. The tool is 100% free and is called the Vodafone Future Jobs Finder, if anyone's interested in Googling that. But it is based on a scientific approach using psychometric tests. And once someone goes through the assessment, then they themselves get a report of their aptitudes and interests, which are also mapped to digital job categories and give them a better idea of which roles they themselves would likely enjoy and be more suited for. So in addition to that, the user also receives some very specific digital career recommendations and free learning tools as well. This is just one example, and we see plenty of other examples out there as well. Companies and governments and workers' organizations really joining forces in order to offer global workforce reskilling opportunities. And they have an invested interest in doing this because, yes, many have big hearts and are very caring for their communities, but also it saves them a ton of money in order to reskill local or current employees. And I believe I saw in a Harvard Business Review article that reported the cost of reskilling was roughly about $24,000 or so per person in the US. And that compared to the dollars that are actually tied to hiring and onboarding and training, and then maybe even tie in some severance money that might be involved in there. But anyway, the cost of all of that was 6 times more to hiring externally versus building from within. So yes, I agree. It definitely depends on the type of role and organization, but it lends itself as a solid data point for employees and governments to really double down on that notion of reskilling and to revisit that. And I mentioned that there are several programs out there already. There's para-government coalitions. They go to private sector and they really want to find out what's needed and where they can invest in order to build those needed skills. And these programs provide a really nice jumping off point, or at least a framework for what's needed across those various industries, so that really anyone can benefit from using websites like this. And again, they're free. Most of them are free out there. A good example of this is last year, actually, in New York, back in 2020, Governor Cuomo wanted to build back a strong economy. So he announced a new online training platform so that New Yorkers could really get back on their feet. And the course offerings are provided from a partnership between the New York State Department of Labor and then also Coursera, which is a leading online learning platform organization. And within this, there are over 4,000 or so different courses available covering topics that range from anything from mechanical engineering all the way over to project management, to technology, to data science type skills. So there is that available for the New York folks. Broader, I know Randstad is a large HR firm and they did something similar, and they really committed to touching the working lives of 500 million people by 2030 by launching new training and development partnerships. And then another example, this one's kind of a fun one in my mind, is that there's an organization called X Prize, and they are really known for designing and operating incentive competitions to solve for challenges that we find across humanity, really. So they thought that reskilling was such an important topic that they turned it into a competition and currently have 10 teams across 4 or 5 different countries competing for $1.5 million or so in order to generate the best and most effective design and demonstration of that rapid training and reskilling solution for those individuals who are most vulnerable to employment loss in the US. So this solution that these teams are coming up with, it needs to reduce training time by 50% for occupations within a living wage. And then those individuals who are participating also need to be able to provide or to be able to participate at no cost to the individuals. So that one's kind of a fun one and interesting to think about. If we go to the next slide, we did insert a slide on Siemens, which is a good example that we partnered with them. It's a good example where, similar to what Stefan was talking about, you have to think about your long-term business strategy. And these individuals definitely did that. They defined the new skills and competencies that were needed in this agile world. And then they developed their new mindset competency model. And we partnered with them to then implement a few quick but very engaging assessments that were shown very predictive of performance and fit for 5 of their different role types. And so here, more importantly, going through the assessments really allowed their employees to gain insights about their own skills, preferences, potential, their areas of job matches, and so forth. And so having that information over to their employees tied in with their L&D framework as well was really strong tool. It also provided, I think it was the top 3 job matches with all of that information. So as a result, Siemens was now really able to better identify the quality internal candidates for those transformational roles that were a focus. They increased engagement by empowering their workforce to take action with their careers, and they decreased turnover, all while showing no adverse impact And this effort really helped people at Siemens find internal jobs, gave them upskilling and reskilling opportunities, while at the same time fitting people into new jobs to meet their business strategy. So how this works in organizations is very similar to how it works at a societal or even community level, but you can plan a bit better within the bounds of your organization. So Stefan, I'm going to turn it over to you actually to get your thoughts on future skills planning within an organization.
Yeah, and in a way, when you talk about Vodafone and Siemens, those are cases that benefit directly a specific organization. And where I would basically connect the tools that you showed with a broader strategic workforce planning process is to say, once you develop tools like that, that connect people with jobs, people with skills, skills with job and all that, and you give people a good reason to use these tools, you can then also collect the data for planning purposes. So you basically go from a very transactional place to a strategic place, or a strategic place to a tactical place, simply because we have the tools, we have the data, and then you can use that data for something broader to develop workforce strategies. And that's ultimately what this process then becomes. Once you have that data and you pull it all together, you can identify what skills you currently have, what skills do your employees currently have. You can identify what you need. You can then define what the future would hold, and you can connect all that to put together an action plan that might include learning and development, but it might also include other means to get the skills into your organization that you need.
Yeah. I think it's also really important with regards to tech skills coming into play, and regardless of the type of skill here, it does fall back onto behaviors and motivations that come into play. So you have to think about and reflect on, does your workforce really have the mindset and the motivation in order to develop those new skills as the market, make cool for some skills and then others emerge as more critical.
Awesome. Well, I've been taking copious notes here, Kathy and Stefan, as you've been chatting. So let me just kind of paraphrase a little bit of what I heard you share. So clearly, Kathy, as you indicated up at the top of the conversation, hard and soft skills are both important in terms of figuring out what future skills are with an organization. And then some of the big pressures that we're facing really is digitization and automation. And then Stefan, as you pointed out, there's a lot of wisdom in starting out small and then seeing how you can tie a smaller initiative to a broader business strategy and then scale it from there. And then I think our last conversation here really pointed out that everybody has a role in this, and you really have to understand where to start in order to move things ahead. As I hear you reflect on these different points, for me, the biggest risk area that I heard is not taking action now. It seems like, everybody's doing it. Every organization's concerned about it. We're concerned about it at the state and local governmental level. And it really, it's a critical and essential thing to do right now. So, and then as you were sharing as well, for me, it sounds like taking that first step really comes down to defining the direction of travel that you should be taking, which in this case seems to be understanding where your skills gaps are. So Stefan, I'm sure you would agree with that sentiment. But with that being said, where would you recommend that folks listening in today would start in understanding their future skills gaps? And then also, what are some of the next steps that they should be taking?
Yeah, once you identify your skills gaps, you basically have to start thinking about how do you address them. And the key point that I wanted to raise here is, and I briefly alluded to that a couple of minutes ago, is that there's more than one way to address skills gap. It's basically, once you identify them, you can, of course, address skills gaps through learning and development. But in fact, for some positions, it might in fact be, Kathy alluded to that as well, it might in fact be that learning and development might not be the best way to get there because the learning curve might be too big. At that point, you might consider hiring people or hiring for these skills. You might even consider at that point to outsource skill development. And even those three options are not the only ones out there. There's the possibility to look at those employees who already have these skills and retain them better. If you basically see that you historically lost these people, or you can start leveraging them better, develop technologies or the support that they need to apply their skills in a broader way than before. And ultimately, it might also be that you identify skills gap, and if you're connected to the business and finance, you can at that point go back and tell the business that either you need more budget or more money because within the budget you cannot address these skills gap, or you might even at some point have to tell the business that it has to reorient itself because you're not able to overcome the skill gap within your organization. So these are the key points. So once you identify a skill gap, these are the key things that you can do to actually address it.
Oh, that's great. Well, and I think then the other side of that, of your observation, Stefan, then becomes really understanding people too, and what skills people have, and what they bring to the table. So Kathy, with your expertise as an industrial and organizational psychologist, maybe I can pose this question to you. It's like, how do you understand your workforce? Specifically, if you started looking at things like capabilities or skills, like we've been chatting, but then also potential for reskilling and upskilling.
Yeah. So how you understand your workforce comes from determining your business strategy, which we've already established, that knowing what you need for the roles going into the future, and then finding and rewarding that talent. And determining those competencies and skills that we talked about initially that are needed today, but then also going forward, and then finding the best ways to source and assess that talent is what it boils down to. So hopefully in an ideal world, you can look internally and uncover a world of potential that you can reskill and align with even more roles from within your own organization. And there are all types of assessments available. I know that we have several that focus on things like digital readiness and digital leadership and virtual workers and 20 million other things. But getting an understanding of the capabilities and the direction is really important. And then also, if you think about it, it's pretty darn expensive in order to source talent, particularly in the tech space. But a lot of tech skills, for example, are trainable. And so to become, for example, a data scientist, you can go through a boot camp experience and come out of it ready for an entry-level role as a data scientist. So going internally allows organizations really to maintain that knowledge of those employees that who are already there, that they have, and then you can build on top of that. If you need to go externally, great, please do that as well. But once you have those employees, retaining them is very important. So go and getting to know their abilities and what motivates them, and investing in their development and really giving them the tools to take charge of their career paths can be really powerful.
Absolutely. Well, Kathy, you mentioned one key word, assessment, and that really perked my interest here around the topic of how do you measure or evaluate these skills, and then how do you conceptualize the output that comes from that process. So maybe if you just want to share a couple of minutes just to kind of walk through how you go about measuring these skills, and then how do you then use the data that's generated from that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we measure and evaluate skills by collecting data. And so again, first we need to understand what it takes to be successful in a role. And then we often use assessments to target specific skills and competencies and to look for fit and potential and ROI. And we can also generate reports after we do implement some assessments that really give us some good insights. We can look at results and the impact on an organization or within a given department or within a specific role, and certainly on down to the individual level, where we can look at the strengths and areas of opportunity and how that individual might be better suited in different roles or potential there. So we can see the areas of strength of what's working as well, and then also what might not be working as well, what might not need to be tweaked a little bit there, as well as where some additional trainings could come in. So assessments and how we measure that information and the output is really key to all of this as well.
Perfect. And that kind of primes another question for me here. And maybe Stefan, I'll pass this one over to you first. So obviously, as we're chatting about skills here, there's this emerging picture that there are some critical skills, or the folks are talking about critical skills. So what does that mean from your perspective? And what is it that really makes a skill critical? And then as you're reflecting on that, like, how do you go about recognizing these skills, and how do you measure it? And then how do you know folks have these skills, and potentially even how can you train them? I know there's like a lot of different questions all in one there, but maybe you can kind of like pick your starting point there, Stefan, and I'm sure Kathy has some thoughts on that one as well.
All right, so let's unpack this. First, what are critical skills, right? So I'm not the person who would say there's only one definition, but there's one definition that worked really well for me over the years. Think about it on two dimensions, so to speak. One element of criticality is that it is important for strategic goal achievement for your organization. So it's something that is really critical, so to speak, for your organization to have in the future. And the second one is scarcity. So even if something is important for you to have in the future, if that skill is readily available in the labor market, I don't think it's critical ultimately, because you just basically go out and obtain that skill. So a critical skill is something that is very scarce in the labor market and fundamentally important or critical for your strategic goal achievement for the organization. Now, how do you measure that? So one thing, of course, is to split this up and see, okay, first of all, go through your business forecast, go through your business plans, engage with your business leaders, and they can basically tell you where the business is going, where your business is going. And once you understand that, you can basically then translate these goals into skills that you need to achieve. So that's basically how you can measure the strategic element here. And the scarcity element, there's a lot of labor market data out there. And in fact, some of the labor market data from your industry can already tell you a little bit more than just scarcity. It can tell you a little bit more about trends. So what kind of jobs are currently in high demand, and what kind of jobs are in high demand going forward? I'm saying that because we actually did that research using our Radford data. We basically looked at job growth, we looked at pay premium over time, and we looked at trends. And I can tell you right now that within the market, there are three basic areas that bubble up as critical technology skills. One is data science in its broadest sense. And that goes from data scientists to statisticians to mathematicians to AI specialists and all that. So that's one bucket. The second bucket is all about, data security, cyber security, this kind of stuff. All sort of related jobs related to that are really getting extremely critical for many, many organizations. And the third one is emerging, blockchain. No surprise there, right? Bitcoin and other applications of blockchain are in very high demand. So that's basically, I hope Marino speaks a little bit about how do you define that, how do you measure them, and maybe give a little bit of insight as to what we are seeing in the marketplace right now as being considered critical skills.
Oh, that's great, Stefan. Kathy, any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, and I think that for me, critical skills has a little bit of a broader definition. So to me, critical skills is all about the most needed skills that workers need to stay ahead in today's business environment. And so no matter what industry or role, there are definitely certain skills that will almost make or break your success as an organization, as a specific business. And so just to talk in generalities here, maybe it's collaboration or agility or creativity or even conscientiousness. I don't know. There's a lot of research out there that links conscientiousness with success. So conscientious employees are those individuals who are responsible and dependable and proactive. They show up on time and they meet all of their deadlines. So yes, a bit of this is hardwired into someone, but combine that with the environmental influences and add in skills training and add in the motivation, and you can really grow the skills a bit more within your employees. Again, invest in them and they will feel more valued, they'll be more engaged, reinforce their sense of purpose and what drives them. So maybe creativity is a critical skill for your company or in a given role. And I think back again during the pandemic, when we saw many companies shift gears entirely, they were extremely creative in ways to help all of humanity, where we saw Ford switching from manufacturing cars to producing medical equipment parts and assembling face shields, and they were using their 3D printers for all of this, or where we saw Bacardi switching from making rum to making hand sanitizer. So whatever the critical skills are for your organization, take the time to identify them, measure them, and develop them. People can really do some amazing things if given the tools and training and opportunity.
Oh, that's amazing, Kathy. Well, clearly there's a lot of dynamism that's happening here, and organizations really need to understand that dynamism. And I can maybe just share one complementary point of view on this from some work that I was involved in recently. We were working with a large international bank that was trying to figure out, well, how to take stock of their critical skills. Where are those gaps? And the bank had just so much data available, and data was kind of hidden in lots of different places. So we worked with this particular client to take stock of this data and also to give it a point of view on where it could build digital talent across the entire enterprise. And just to kind of give you a sense of some of the specific things that we did, and my dog is getting involved in the conversation here too, as she's wont to do during webinars. So if you see my hand moving up and down here, that's her wanting to join in and share her perspectives on all things digital and future skills too. So anyway, so maybe we can just go on to the next slide, and I'll give you a couple of insights that we generated from this work. So we were actually able to look at this organization's jobs across the entire organization, and then also tag all of those jobs with skill profiles using established skill profile frameworks that we already had in place and that are also available out in the marketplace. And then figure out exactly what skills are available. And then based on that, we were also able to provide a high-level overview of how this skill or how these skills are distributed across the organization. So what you see in the slide here is a representation of the talent in the organization, particularly in the tech and ops world, that focus on building technology, changing technology, or maintaining technology. And you'll also see that there's a comparison of our client versus their peers. So we actually were able to generate this point of view for not only our client organization, but also directly compare them to 30 of their other global peers. And what we could see there is that they were ahead, maybe a little bit in the building area, but somewhat in the maintenance area, but they were lagging in terms of kind of like the innovation space of really changing and inventing new technology. And the point to all of this was not really to kind of replicate what other organizations are doing, but to explore what our client can do or what they could take from less traditional peers to feed into their own strategy, particularly as it pertained to developing this pivotal digital technology talent that they require to move things forward. So I think this example here just kind of underscores the importance of understanding what you have and where you need to go, and also getting a lens on what critical talent is. So Stefan, as part of this project, one of the things that we did was we also looked at flight risk and pay implications, and actually that's a question that we have here from the audience as well. So what role, from your perspective, can rewards play in addressing this future skills gap? And I know we're kind of getting a little bit tight on time here, so maybe we'll keep the response, our next couple of responses, kind of tight.
Okay, I keep it tight. And I would say that pay for skills has been a major topic out there. But of course, if you want to pay for skills, you actually have to start measuring them, right? So that's really the problem. The second thing is that beyond that, when you look at the data, we actually connected our Radford data to data from ONET to better understand if different skill profiles are actually paying differently. The reality is that the jobs that pay better have certain skills profile attached to them. So for example, the ones that are paying the most right now require people to know statistics and all that, and are able to develop statistics and data science and use statistics and data science software. I can share more about the research with you if you're interested. But beyond compensation, the other thing is just paying employees more doesn't necessarily get you the skills that you need. We have numerous cases where some organizations, maybe in banking, a little bit in manufacturing, are trying to attract technology skills that is typically found in those technology organizations, such as Google, such as Apple. And regardless of what they pay, it's just really hard for them to get these people in because the work environment is different. And that's something to be considered here.
Perfect. And clearly data plays a big role here. So, and Stefan, I know that's something that you touch on a lot today, but maybe if you can just share a couple of points, and I'm sure, Kathy, you have some points of view on that as well.
Well, data came a long way over the last 20 years. I would say that 20 years ago, there was a lot more talk about data when it comes to workforce planning and skills management. But I think now clients are in a much better position than they ever were to at least accept the results that is based on data. So yeah, today, I think there are several options available to understand skills for pay and skills. Assessments is one, connecting data that you have to other sources that already exist, such as ONET, and there are multiple other ways. Kathy, anything to add there?
Yes, yeah, yes to data, always a yes to data. That's how you get lots of good information. I agree. We talked about, lots of different ways in order to measure these skills. I think that a few things to keep in mind is just to make sure that you use assessments that are reliable and valid and will give you an objective outcome, such as a score, or rating, or description. Again, lots of different assessment types out there. And one thing I did want to bring up, because Stefan, you brought it up earlier, another thing to think about as we move into the future is some of those future focused capabilities like blockchain technology. And so basically this, for those of you, if you haven't heard of it, is a way of verifying the authenticity of and storing data. And so here in practice, it means that any industry where accuracy of records, so think about financial ledgers or medical records or academic records, things along those lines, where that's critical, blockchain has the ability to revolutionize the way that that data is stored and handled. On the flip side, it also means that data is democratized in a way that it has never been before. And the way that that works is that each party on a given blockchain has access to the entire database of its history, and the parties can verify the records in the transactions. Once something is entered into the database, it can't be altered, and that's because everything is linked together through all previous records, thus the chain part. But there's also increased security concerns as we as society still have to figure all of this out, but it's happening. There's a company called Velocity Network who's created and using blockchain technology for a database of career of records. So participants can choose what records they're going to show and how it's going to be used. But wouldn't it be cool if you could go out to a database and type in 3 or so different critical skills and then whatever certificate is necessary for a given role, and then immediately you have hundreds of potential candidates at your fingertips. So lots of cool stuff out there.
Perfect. Well, Stefan and Kathy, I'm going to pose one question to you each here just to kind of close this out. So Stefan, obviously, job architecture is a big topic to chat about here as well. And I know we have a slide on that. So maybe in a minute or less, if you can share any observations on the role of job architecture. And then Kathy, to prime the next question here, we've got an audience question on reskilling. So we'll give you a minute or so just to kind of address that question as well. What are some of the differences in how organizations can do that? And I'll wrap us up and hand it over to Steve. So Stefan, let's start off here with job architecture.
Well, any planning mechanism, even the vision that Kathy just mentioned, where organizations can basically enter a few skills and identify candidates, or the vision where candidates through their job and through their job history can basically see what next jobs would be available for them. Any of that ultimately would require some common language, some common way to structure data, some common way to think about data. And that could be a common skills architecture, that could be a common job architecture. So even though talking about job architecture in this context, as we're talking about blockchain and artificial intelligence, might sound a little bit mundane, I would still say that today it's still an important starting point for these initiatives. And what we take pride in here at Aon, at Radford McLagan, within our assessment solutions business, we are really looking into figuring out how to best develop these taxonomies so that this vision will come true, so that many organizations can interact with their own employees internally, but also better understand external labor markets by developing a common language, if you will, that allow you to structure jobs, that allow you to structure skills. And to us, again, this would be a very good starting point, which is still, however mundane it might seem, very important to create any of the more interesting, cooler things that might happen afterwards.
Thank you so much, Stefan. All right, Kathy, here's our audience question, and we'll close on this one. So the question is, there's going to be so much demand for cybersecurity engineers. How can companies upskill or reskill employees for that rather than face a bidding war in the marketplace?
Good question. So just to differentiate really quickly, so upskilling is the process of learning new skills within your current job family. Reskilling is the process of learning new skills so that you can do a completely different job outside of your current job family. So with this, we had mentioned, again, there's lots of different organizations out there who have trainings available. Many of them are free, where you could start an individual down that path. But first, again, it's really important to take a look at the motivations and the behaviors behind individuals. The individuals who are motivated can go down that path of reskilling much faster and much easier. So we can certainly provide some additional information if interested, but let me wrap it there because I see that we're waiting.
I do have a quick comment about that. Yeah. Just think about SpaceX here in Los Angeles. They hire rocket scientists, yes, but interestingly, they actually also hire hourly employees and semi-skilled employees, and they over time train them up to become rocket scientists. Imagine that. So this is in fact possible. You might have to think about how you structure training and how you structure careers, but it is possible, especially if you don't have the pockets that Google or Apple has to attract these kind of employees from the outside. Sometimes you just don't have a choice and you have to go internal with that.
Absolutely. And Stefan, as I'm sitting here, I can actually watch the rockets go up from my office window here, and there's one going up on Thursday on my daughter's birthday. So she'll have the biggest candle I think anybody can ask for in your ninth birthday. But with that being said, thank you both so much for your insights. Steve, Chris, and the From Day One team, thank you so much for having us here. And Steve, maybe just to close this out, I'll hand it back over to you here for a second.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. Stefan and Marinus, that was a great conversation about the workforce of the future. Thanks again to our sponsor, Aon, and to all of you for participating today. But before you go, we'd love to hear your feedback about today's webinar. In the chat right now, I'm adding a short survey from Aon. Please check the chat space and let them know your thoughts. In this quick survey, we'd like to know what workforce issues are on top of mind for your organization right now, how satisfied you were with the webinar, and how we might follow up on any of the issues we talked about. I'd also like to remind you that we'll be receiving an email from us. It's going to provide you with links both to today's slide presentation and to the report it's based on from Aon. Now, looking ahead, if you'd like to join us at From Day One for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. This Thursday, June 10th, we'll be talking more about breaking down barriers to build a diverse tech workforce. And next Wednesday, on June 16th, we'll be hosting our monthly full-scale virtual conference that focuses on the new benefits that employees need and want today. Visit our website at fromday1.co to learn more. So thanks, everyone. Stay well.